Welcome to AI and ChatGPT. What do educators need to know? I am excited. And who am I? You may say, well, I am Dr. Desiree Alexander. I am the founder, CEO of Educator Alexander Consulting. And these are all of the ways that you can find me today. I am hosting the amazing and our AI resident, Rachelle, today to talk about this topic. If you are on the recording or you're watching this on YouTube, look right underneath the video. You can click and you will see the resource for today. No, you cannot get a certificate of attendance, but you can get the knowledge. For people who are here live, if you fill out the evaluation, you can get a certificate at the end of the session. What do we have coming up? Minecraft in education. Tuesdays in June 6th, June 13th, and June 20th, completely free, 6 to 7 p.m. So even if you're working during those days, you can still hop on and learn about Minecraft in education. Go to that website for more information. I think you can become like certified in Minecraft, all kind of stuff. So Minecraft in education, Tuesdays in June. Then we have Saturday, June 10th, affinity groups. So if you want to know about what is an affinity group, and then we're also going to go deeper into talk about creating a space for self-advocacy for Muslim and Arab female students. Check it out, Saturday, June 10th. Then we have passed the SLLA exam. So if you're in a state that you need this test to get educational leadership certified, you may want to join this session. We just did a webinar earlier today that was free about the logistics and the mindsets. You can definitely catch that on YouTube. This one is the entire session from 8 to 4, and it's 1:55 and all that good stuff. So you can definitely check all that information out. Then we have School Leadership 101. This is all about if you are anywhere, it's not test specific, but anywhere you're thinking about going into school leadership, what do you need to know to prepare yourself? Then we have ISTE. All of this is in June. Why is all this in June? But ISTE. And then for ISTE, I have a lot more stuff to add to this slide. I have 2 book signings, all that kind of stuff. So definitely I would say, if you're not subscribed to my newsletter, which all of you will automatically be anyway, but if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you can get all this great information. Then July, we don't rest. July 1st. Shift the mood of your classroom by becoming trauma informed. So learning about behaviors in the classroom, where do those traumas come from, how to deal with them, awesome session. Digital footprint, what is it? What isn't, and how do you use it? So how do you use your digital footprint to be more powerful, to be more positive, and how to unlock your potential for future job growth? NFTS, this lady looks so familiar. In education, again, she is our resident AI. If there's anything dealing with AI, all these buzzwords, like what is NFTs? What? She's going to come and let you know. And that is Rachelle, who you're about to listen to today. The Smart Way to Write IEP Goals and Objectives by the amazing Dr. Marlene. So she is one of my resident SPED people. So anytime we have a SPED talk, I'm like, Dr. Marlene, come and help us out. So she's going to be telling us how the smart way, like SMART goals, to write your IEP goals and objectives. Every single person sitting in here should be at the session. Then we have creating equity through the arts. So we're talking about creating that equity through the different art programs that you have and on your campus, but also through your classroom, how to explore using the arts as a vehicle for equity and cultural responsiveness. So definitely come check that out. Showcasing your wins, celebrating your success with your community. So a lot of us are in schools and we only hear negative stuff in the press, right? We only hear negative stuff in our community. So how can we take the narrative? How can we let the community know all the positive things that we're doing? So come and check that out. We're not done, y'all. We're not done. Strengthening your math engagement with Desmos. So if you're a math educator or you just want to learn about Desmos and how can I use it, for my kid or for my students, definitely come and check that out by awesome Andy. Rachelle's coming back. She's not done with us. For learning in the metaverse. So I know we may have heard the word metaverse and we're like, what is that? Is it an online? Come and learn about it, because this stuff is not going away, y'all. So if you're like kind of sticking your hand in the sand, like I'm not going to learn about AI because it's not going away. Okay, so come and learn about it now. And then we have voice, value, and validation, a paradigm shift. So how can we support and encourage student voice in our classrooms and becoming more aware of how to do that with very, very practical tips. And then we have one more that is not here just yet, but we're going to have one more coming in December. So that's what I mean by we're done for this year. We have enough, and then we're going to start doing scheduling for next year. So we always have our self-paced classes for test prep, just kind of sitting there on the side. So you can always go and learn more about those at the same website at alex.net/events. Of course, tell me what you want to learn in 2024, because 2023 is pretty done. But what do you want to learn in 2024? But if we have to stick another one in 2023, we will. That's what we do. We love to learn. So, it's a lot of stuff, but you can find it all on one website, y'all. Go to that one website. You can register for everything that you want to register for. Most things are completely free. But let's start talking about what you came here for, which is AI and ChatGPT. I guess we could say Chat, right? We can push those words together. In education.
Thanks, everybody, for joining in this afternoon. And as always, Dr. Desiree, I love listening to you when you start the webinars. That I honestly never want to be the one to start talking after you. I just want to listen to you talk the whole time. So thanks to everybody who's joining in now or later. I did drop the link into a survey. I promise not to spam you. The link is also posted there at the top of the screen. But I'm not kidding when I say it. I have my iPad right next to me because we don't have a ton of time. And I definitely encourage some, interaction in the chat. If you have questions, prompts, things that you want to share, by all means, drop that in there. I'm certainly not an expert. I'm here to learn just like all of you. But this kind of helps me look and see some of the things that you may have done, what your role is, what you're looking to learn, and all of that so that I can kind of like skip through. So with that being said, just very briefly about me, my name is Rachelle Dené Poth. I am a Spanish and STEAM teacher. I love learning. I stay involved in a lot of different spaces. ISTE, of course, I'm an ISTE certified educator, which was an amazing experience a couple of years ago when I did that. I teach Spanish and I teach a course in STEAM called What's Next in Emerging Technology. And we cover everything. And I love it because if I get a news article about something groundbreaking, some emerging tech, that becomes our topic for conversation. But we do focus on, old technology, digital citizenship. A bulk of our year is spent on AI, augmented virtual reality, coding. Although this year I've ended it by having them do podcasts because I thought that was a very fun thing to do. And they're creating their brands and logos, and we're learning about marketing. And they're also reflecting on what they've learned this year. So I just love to learn from them. And I'm excited to be here with all of you today to learn from you as well. And AI is a topic that I didn't know that much about 5.5 years ago now. And I wrote a blog for Getting Smart. And I was clueless about it. I mean, my whole perception, I'm going to ask a question in the chat. So when somebody says to you artificial intelligence or AI, what is one of the first things that comes to your mind? It could be a word, it could be a thing, it could be a technology, anything. Whatever pops in your mind, type it in. It could be an emoji, robots taking over the world. I would often think of Terminator, different movies and things. Of course, now more often, people talk about ChatGPT. I love all of these terms that are in there, but I didn't know that much at all. And so that was my big question. And I intentionally do not have the volume playing in the background, but when I started to teach about it, I dove in. And so over the past 5+ years now, when I've done sessions or in my class with my students, I focus on, what do we need to know? And I used to say, and I'm sure some of you, or if not all of you in here, have said this as well, I'm just, put the word just before the kind of teacher or what our role is in education. And I used to think, well, I'm just a Spanish teacher. I can't teach about AI in my Spanish classes. Or I've heard friends say, I'm just a 3rd grade teacher. I can't. But we all can. And there's lots of different ways to do it. Now, the problem is, there's Terminator, do we have enough time and all this extra time? Probably not. So my goal is, and I hope you will help me with this, is to share ideas, to give you some things that you can take away and get started with, like right away in your classroom, in your schools, that that you don't have to be an expert, because trust me, I am not an expert, but I am somebody who I would say this is probably the area that I've spent the most time over the last 5 years, seconded by maybe social emotional learning, probably in those areas, because those were some areas where I really wanted to grow. So in my classroom, or when I have sessions, what I do is I start with that kind of a question, what is AI, with my students, and putting in the questions, putting in the responses, I should say, and then I'll show this video to them. And if anybody wants links, I have a document that I'll share with you that has links to everything and even more than what we'll get through here today. But I show the video, and it's from that crash course series. So if you've ever seen any of those videos out there, there's a lot of different great videos available. They have a whole series of videos focused on AI, from very basic, like you're seeing in the background, what is it, to more advanced, where it breaks down different components of artificial intelligence, like neural networks and machine learning, and it goes on and on. So with my students, or when I'm at a conference, or I do some, professional development with some teachers at schools, start in the same way, with a discussion, with some type of a hook or a video prompt, because people will say, I don't know how to start teaching about it. Well, it's conversation. And in those conversations, tons of learning happens. So I will start with a video. Like I said, ask the question like I did to some of you as well. And then I'm going to pause this to move over to the next one. And you can see, hopefully if it popped up on the bottom of the screen, what you could do depending on the grades that you work with. And based on the survey, we have somebody represented from all of these different areas and age groups. You could go through and have students learn about all of these different components of it. It can be as much or as little as you want. There are a lot of activities, lots of free resources out there, many of which you'll see in the document that Dr. Desiree had dropped into the chat, that also has some augmented virtual reality in there too, just easier to put it all into one. So we look at video, we have the conversation, and then we actually get into, what are some definitions of it? Now, I've asked my students, just like I've asked you before, what is it? And they'll look it up, they'll Google it, of course, we refer to Google, and they'll read me this really long, detailed definition, very technical definition of artificial intelligence, for example. And I said, but what if somebody just stopped you and said, can you just tell me really quickly what AI is? You're probably not going to read that whole answer to them. They want something very easy to kind of digest. And so we could all give examples of it with us as educators, or in a lot of the things that we do in our personal lives. We may not even realize how much of what we do and interact with has artificial intelligence involved in it. So at its base form, it's machines that, like it says, and I won't read you from the screen, but it can process and sort through and learn from and build upon massive amounts of information. So when you do a Google search, just think back to the days of the Dewey Decimal System and going to the library, trying to write a report, and you're looking through the card catalog, go find the books, and you sit down and you're like, I've got nothing. And yet that process took you half hour longer. Now, Google, you can get millions, if not billions of results in less than a second. So it can sort through all kinds of information. But we know that AI is much more powerful than just simply a Google search, because we've been hearing about it, especially over the last 6 months now, I guess at this point, since ChatGPT became available, and now everybody is talking about AI. So in my class, we just start with some basic terms. What is artificial intelligence? And I'll give you a task here coming up soon, machine learning. And we will also look at ways that this is helping me as an educator in some different areas of work. How could this help in the airline industry, for example, or in the financial industry or medical field, and get students thinking about it, because these skills are in demand. And so when we might say, well, I'm just a whatever kind of a teacher, we have some math teachers here. There are things that you can do in your classes that can help students to not only build their content skills, which we want, but also help them to understand these technologies. But then the other piece for us as educators, how do we use these tools and understand them so that it helps us to, save time that is spent on a task that might, be very time consuming, like grading papers. So then we can take that time we saved and work with students. And like one example is looking at assessments. When we give our students assessments, like I love paper projects and having students write, like that's essential. They need to be able to write. But in teaching a language, I need to be able to understand where my students are in learning. and to give them feedback that's timely, authentic, and meaningful. And so relying on that quick game-based learning tool that we use in our classroom that can then go through and as they're answering, for example, see that there's patterns in the questions that they're missing. And then it can give them extra questions based on that. I could do that if I have a one-on-one conversation with them or if I check their work, but that process is so much faster. And so when we bring in artificial intelligence, we have machine learning, and it can sort through and analyze information, find patterns, and grow and build skills over time, and apply that and see what that looks like in our classroom and in the real world. We need to understand it so we can help our students understand it. Something else, that another term we talk about, we've probably all been hearing about, generative AI. I know that based on my survey, some of you have typed in that you've used some of these different tools that can generate text and images and videos. There's so many things that are out there, and I'm going to share some of those tools with you. So we look at that, the neural network compared to, our brain, how we can sort through information. If I name 4 objects and say which one doesn't fit within that category, like we can figure out what it is. We sort through the data. But when it comes to this technology, it's so much faster. So I could ask you a very basic math problem. What's 2 plus 3? You're like, oh, that's easy. That's 5. But if I ask you some really big detail with multiple different types of processes for math equations in it, it takes a longer time. So a neural network sorts through all that information quickly. A couple other terms, just because, again, like teaching about it and understanding it, natural language processing. So if you've ever interacted with a chatbot or you're talking, you have Alexa, hey, Alexa, set a reminder, or Siri, any of those things, it mimics the conversation. And I know, and I don't know if anyone wants to share the chat or not, but have you ever made a phone call and you actually feel like you're talking to a person, but it's not actually a person? It's just been programmed because it's using the NLP. So you're like, I don't think this is actually a human, but it can simulate those conversations. We use speech recognition. If you do some writing, like I do a lot of writing, and I rely on using my voice to have it go into the text. It is such a time saver. I was just asked earlier today, like, how do you do so much writing? Because I use the speech recognition software, the voice to text and create things. Is it perfect? No, it makes mistakes because at the end of the day, these things have been programmed by humans. But it does help to kind of streamline some of the things that we might be doing, tasks that we might have in our work that we do, but also in our daily lives. Deep learning, won't go too much into that, but that's just a much more complex artificial intelligence system, does mimic the brain, of course. And then finally, the CAPTCHA. And this, everybody I'm sure is probably familiar with the CAPTCHA codes, which is the completely automated public Turing test named after Alan Turing to determine whether it's a human or a computer. And that came out of Carnegie Mellon. A lot of artificial intelligence research and work, it's constantly, I'm in Pittsburgh, and so there are a lot of opportunities here for people to learn about AI. But the thing about this is, years ago, if you went to a concert, you had to go and line up at the stadium or wherever the concert was, or maybe you went to the grocery store like I did here, and you're the first person in line. You think, I'm going to get front row. But then it became a thing that computers could be programmed to buy up all the tickets. So now you go to a website and you have to prove you're not a robot. You check the box, or it had those codes, but those codes was a problem for accessibility. So then they made it, instead of just reading it, it would be, you had the possibility for it to read the code to you. Now there's images. I can't tell you how many times I've had to click on tractors and crosswalks and bikes and trucks still for it to think that I'm a robot and not a human. But that's the reason that has been set up, is so that it can distinguish between a human and a computer. So those are just some of the basic, like when I start with my students, what is it? What are some of these terms that we're hearing? And what does that look like? Okay, so here's the first activity for those of you joining in. And if you've joined me before, you may have seen this, but these are 10 everyday uses of AI. And what you're supposed to do, and this is something you can do in your classroom if you're doing PD with teachers, or just for fun, is give yourself, or tell people to give themselves a point for every one of those 10 that on a most everyday basis you use. So look through the list really quickly. And if most days of the week you're using those, give yourself a point. And then I'm curious if you want to share in the chat what your score is. If anybody gets a 10 over the last, all right, because Wayne's got a 10. Over the last couple of months, especially, and I've seen this increase because when I've been doing this same little activity for about 2 years, because these statistics, they've basically stayed the same. And over the last probably 6 months to 10 months, I've had more people who are at a 9 and a 10 than years prior. And I think that's just because in the last 3 years, since 2020, March 2020, we've relied so much more on some of these things. For me, for years, I was just like at a 7. No facial recognition. I wasn't watching Netflix. And I also don't have smart home devices. But in November of 2020, watching Netflix seemed like a good thing to do. But it's just a fun activity also for people who may not know a lot about AI or think that it's not applicable to them. They're not, interacting with it, may not realize like all of these different things that we're using every day or a lot of the days. And commuting can be, Uber Eats. I had a 9th grader who used Uber Eats, and he actually had like an 8 out of 10. But I do see some people that end up getting a 5 as well. So just a fun activity. I think it's always interesting to see like who ends up with a 10 and who ends up with like a 9 or, even lower, a 5. So I wanted to go to this other one, a couple more things to think about before I give you some tools for education, and then a little bit about ChatGPT, and then I'll come back to that with some examples and things towards the end here. But some different topics and things that you might be hearing about, especially when it comes to the generative AI. It's not simply, ChatGPT, when I first started to use it, actually in 2020, I helped to do some research on an article about GPT-3. And I couldn't believe what it was capable of. And that was, 3 years ago now at this point. And then in November, I was able to collaborate on a blog post about ChatGPT. And again, I just was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And so I spent probably 3 hours on a Saturday night just typing in all kinds of prompts, a little bit concerned, like, oh no, like my students are all going to be using this. But I'm like, they've had access to translators for years. So what else can it create? Well, now we have all of these different possibilities. Every day, it seems like there's something new that has become available. I mean, the list is continuing to grow. But what I've noticed, and I see some of the responses too in the survey, that more people now are saying they don't really have any real, big concerns as opposed to before. Initially, it was like, oh no, what's going to happen to our assignments and our teaching and our methods, and the students are going to copy and do all of these things. But the reality of it was that like we've always had access to something, or if you didn't have the technology, to somebody else that could help you to do the work for you, which I've had a lot of conversations with friends about that as well. But when it comes to generative, I think that it's really interesting when you dive into some of these to see what it actually can create. I know for myself, for a long time, I was like, I'm really not that creative. Then I learned about sketchnoting, and I was like, oh, I'm actually not that bad. But when you may be trying to write something for your class or come up with ideas for a project, or as a student, I'm taking some courses, and some of it I've struggled with, like ideas, something that's different or creative. And sometimes you just need kind of like that push, that little idea, like help with brainstorming. And so some of these tools where you can, it can generate and write blogs and articles and books. It's been done. There are books out there that have been written. The majority of them have been written by ChatGPT. Does that mean you should just let it write it and just, hey, publish it and put it out there? Well, no, because we have to go through and check it for, reliability, the information, of course, the literacy, the digital literacy is important. But I think the thing that's fun about this, at least in my experience, and you can share this also, is that it's neat to try out. It's fun with my students to explore, to have the conversations, to say, okay, what are the benefits of this? Okay, what are the drawbacks? What are some of the concerns? Or to brainstorm an idea together, like we did with ChatGPT, for example, where I asked them to come up with like a character, a color, all these different things that I had to put into it. And then we asked the ChatGPT to create a story. And then it made this absolutely ridiculously funny story that then the students took turns reading with funny voices. So we had fun looking at it, analyzing it. But there are a lot of tools out there that do create things like text. And I saw in the chat that somebody dropped in about slides, and I'm going to share a tool with you as well. There's lots of tools out there that you can use to create slides. audio content. There's one that I was using. I had a conversation a couple of days ago with a friend who was going to have ChatGPT write something and give it, all of the prompts and assign it a role and say, you are this role and this is what you have to create. And instead of reading it himself, he said, oh, it'd be really cool to have this other voice. Well, there's a tool, Speechify, that you can pick all of these different voices. And one of them that was on there, I think it was like Gwyneth Paltrow, Snoop Dogg was one of them, and it can just kind of go through and create it. So you can have a lot of fun. And I think because we're in education, there's tons of opportunities for us to like really embrace this and learn about it, because like Dr. Desiree said, it's not that it's going to go away. I mean, it's continuing to build. So we're going to look at some different tools that you can explore. Concerns, these are some that I pulled from a session that I did earlier this week. And these are actually some of similar concerns or the impact in the same answers that you have here. And we do have to be creative. I think that's one thing that we've learned in the last 3 years is we have to be flexible. I was very much, like, okay, this is how my class is. We did a lot of different activities. And then we went to virtual. I'm like, oh my goodness, I felt like I forgot how to teach. So it made me reevaluate and think about what I had been doing, what was beneficial, what I could improve upon, and then make some changes and take some risks. And that's something else that some of you have said as well, is like, we have to embrace that risk taking, even if we're not sure about it, even if we're not the experts of it, because it's a really good opportunity for us to learn right along with our students and from our students. And so when it comes to, education specifically, AI, there's a website, if anybody has used this, and I'll just say it out there, and I have it in the document as well. Will robots take my job? And if you go to that site, if you multitask, will robots take my job, and you type in teacher or some role in education, you'll see that we are fairly safe. The things that are not so safe when it comes to like the work that we do are those like clerical tasks. And for the impact for education, these are just a couple of things that I have learned, that I've read about, that I've seen and experienced. That personalized learning I mentioned a little bit before. There are some tools like quizzes, for example. If you've used quizzes, there is Socrates that has been around for a couple of years, where students, if it's in math, for example, could start on an activity. And based on how quickly they respond, whether their response is right or wrong, it charts their own like real-time personalized learning path for them. And it gives them that feedback and that support right away. The other piece of it is that, adapting that learning for students. Of course, us as teachers, we need to understand where students are in the learning process. And that comes from observations, our assessments, those conversations that we have. But sometimes, it's so time sensitive. And just giving myself as an example, in language learning, some of the structures, if anybody's taken a language, it's tough to learn that. The word order is different. The verb conjugations are different. Not that English is an easy language, but I may not, be in that same physical space with students. And if students are not with us in the classroom and they want to get some extra help and we're not available, what is there that's in place that they can have access to that can help them to continue to build their skills, that can give them some feedback, that can help them like on their own learning journey? And that's where tools that are available through AI can come in. The virtual tutors, of course, ties right into that as well, where students can seek help. Maybe it's a chatbot that you have on your own website, because that's something out there now. There's a product that I was trying out earlier this week that I'm not sharing yet, because I want to make sure that I have it all configured. But let's say that students have common questions that they ask you, and you want to set something up. It has all of your notes, your resources, and it's basically like your own ChatGPT system. That can be like a tutor for them, where they ask the questions. And even though it's not you that's available, you're the one that provided the information, and it can adapt based on the students' responses, their questions, and their pacing. Looking at all of the amounts of information we get from students when we give assessments, being able to see patterns more quickly. I know that in this past week, I had to sort through a lot of data based on my students' learning, and it took a really long time. And having something where it can go through and it can pinpoint areas that help me to identify, oh, this is the area I see I need to work on and help my students with, saves me time that I can then spend with them, which is really important to have that connection. So I'll touch upon that again, in a minute, I'm going to skip past this one. So what do you want to know? So here's some of the questions that some of you have from the survey. There are many more, but I think, the number one question is like, how can I get started with this in my classroom? Or what are some of the things that I should be concerned about? Or, grade level, what you teach, how does it fit into it? And the nice thing is that you can find something no matter what your role is, what grade level you teach. And I've seen some things being dropped into the chat as well. And another piece that I think is important, I'm going to skip this one here for now, is that maybe it's not so much that you're actually using some tool like Google AI experiments, for example, just because it's on the screen, but you think about something that you teach in your classroom, and maybe you use one of the tools that creates slides, or you ask ChatGPT, you give it a prompt to come up with some ideas for a project, or you have it generate a test or a quiz or something for students, a writing prompt or some writing prompts, for example, and you share that with them and say, okay, this is what I use ChatGPT for. Okay, let's look at these questions. I did that for a quiz for my Spanish 3, and I think I chose 8 of the questions that it generated, and the rest of them were mine. And a couple of the students said, "It's a really weird question." And I said, "Which one?" And they told me, and I laughed because it was one that was generated by the ChatGPT. It was about verb conjugations, but they said that doesn't sound like something that anybody would say. And they said that for a few of them. And I thought that was really interesting. And I shared with them, I said, yeah. And they said, you use ChatGPT. I said, I explore it every day. I want to understand it. I want to see what the limitations are. So diving in with students, it could be something as simple as that, or there's lots of tools out there. And so in my classroom, start with a couple like the Microsoft AI for Good, which has lots of resources you can use that are available for free for educators. Also the Google AI experiments. And in the chat, I'm curious if anybody has used Quick Draw or the Semantris or any of the Google AI experiments. They have AI, they have AR, and they have VR. So if you have done, say, Quick Draw, if you want to put a Y or an N into the chat, if you wouldn't mind. Oh, and Google Bard, because these ones are kind of fun as well. Depending on your skill for drawing, you can have a lot of fun with it. So let me go to this, and hopefully you can see it on the screen. So if you can see my Quick Draw, if somebody could type just a Y, just to make sure no strange things are happening. But Quick Draw is awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Is fun for many reasons. It doesn't take you any time other than going to the site. And what it does is it gives you 6 terms, or the student's 6 terms, and it searches the neural network where it's stored all of these other images to figure out what it is that you're drawing. So I'm supposed to draw a trombone. I don't have a clue, but let's just say I start drawing a square, I should say. And what it's going to do is it's going to sort through all the things and only guess things that are square. But if I start to draw a circle, it goes to things that are round, and then eventually it has no idea. So I'm not going to go through all 6 of them, but you can see that it sorts through, and it's like it guesses it, and then you have 6 of them, and then it shows your drawings at the end, and you can actually even go to the big old library where they sort all of these drawings. But that's how the neural network works. So if I have to draw something like an oven and I'm putting circles, it's not even guessing anything that's a square. 76 trombones. Yeah, I was going to try that. I did have to draw the Great Wall of China one time, and I thought, how in the world am I going to do this? And it guessed it, but then it couldn't guess when I had to draw a microwave. So go figure. But that is something that's very quick to start with. The other one that I mentioned, and this is something that could be tied into any course that you teach if you have the devices and the students, but they have it's Semantris. It's a word association game, and this is fun for all levels. So let's say you're teaching elementary school and you think, how could I bring in AI? Here are some words. Type the first thing that comes to mind when you think of horse. So if I type in Maine, that was a good call because it bumped it to the bottom, and the words most associated with Maine were just sorted to the bottom, so that you just keep going. There's other ways to play where it has blocks. It's kind of like Tetris, and you get points. So yay, I got the target word. So like students can build literacy skills, words, you name it, and they can learn about artificial intelligence and neural networks and all of that. So now if I type in the word heart, we'll see, yay, I'm winning. So you can have fun. But the thing about it is if I type in Google AI experiments, this can be scary, I'm not going to lie, depending on if you let students go and explore. Oops, sorry, I picked the wrong one. If you let students go and explore on their own, they can find some that are really obnoxious. There are some specific to writing. There are some that there is like the Freddie Mercury meter where the student has to try to sing. And I'll just scroll down here for some of these. The student has to try to sing and it rates them to see like how good they are in comparison with Freddie Mercury. There are some that are like teachable machine where they train the machine and might say like, okay, this is a bottle, this is my face, and they learn about it. There's music, there's art, there's a lot of possibilities. So that again, if you're looking to get started and you think, I don't have a ton of time, that is one good place that you can dive into. So I recommend those. And that's actually how I start with my students. I did that. Some other ones you might look at, the Web Genius, which is Educator. Careful with the age group that you use this with, because depending on the question that you might ask or the person you might think of, what it does is it wants you to think of a character. It could be an animal, it could be real or fictional, and then it asks you questions and you respond either yes, no, maybe, I don't know, and it sorts through. So it's kind of like an if this, then that it goes through. So if the first time I did it, I thought of Don Quixote because Spanish teacher, and within 15 guesses, it guessed Don Quixote. I thought there's no way that this computer, this generated Web Genius is going to guess Don Quixote, but by the process of the questions and my responses, it was able to guess it. Now, in my experience using this in conferences, the highest number, I think somebody got a 43, and I cannot remember who or what they were thinking of, but it helps students understand the process and educators understand the process of like how a chatbot functions, where you go to a website, window pops up, and it's, hi, my name is, how can I help you today? And let's say it's Amazon, and you type in wrong order. Well, somewhere in its programming, it has the words wrong order. So then it might say, oh, you have a problem with your order. Is this correct? Yes. And then it can go in and say, I see from your recent orders that blah, blah, blah. Is this the one that you're referring to? And then you just go through. So it's like, if this, then that. AI for All is a website. There's several of them, and I have those all in my document, but it has opportunities that you can use that are available for free. Resources, there's podcasts, there's blogs, there's articles, you name it. And they even have some lessons, which I'll show you a glimpse of, that are available for you to use for free, full slideshows where you can really get into issues like bias, facial recognition, ethics, for example. The Google Semiconductor, I skipped Botify, just kind of trying to save some time here because I do have some other things I want to share with you. But the semiconductor, you basically like, you know, get up and move. So students actively learning and conducting an orchestra with the webcam if you have access to that. MIT has a ton of resources. Last week, trying to think, it was last week, the Day of AI. So if you haven't explored that, you can go back and see all of the different things that were shared from there. And the low-cost AI projects, I have that link available in the document. But I do want to share a couple of other tools and fun websites with you first. So this one is called AI Club. Has anybody heard of AI Club before? And I'll share with you, I have this book, The Fundamentals of Artificial Intelligence. It's a book by Dr. Nisha Talagala, who is the CEO of AI Club. And they have, if you're looking for resources for grades K through 12, that you want books, online courses, they have webinars that they do all the time, but there's also a lot of free activities. And those are some of the things that you see on the screen. So you could go to the site. I have this linked in my document. You could scan the code, but some fun ways for students. A lot of the activities are for grades 5 through 8. So I know based on our survey here, we have some in that range. But even for younger students, even for older students and us as educators, they're still fun to explore, to understand like how the AI fits into that. Like, where is the artificial intelligence in this? Like, what is happening? One example on the top right, that's generative AI. So it's like a style transfer. You take an image, you pick the certain style that you want, and then it meshes them together and creates something different. Another one that's one of my favorites is here, it can make you a cartoon character. So you could go to the site, you could use your webcam and take a picture, you could upload a profile picture of yourself, and then it's going to analyze your face and it's going to pull in some kind of a cartoon character, and voila, it makes you into what you would be. And that one is called Toonify. So for my students, a lot of what we do, it's not me talking at them about it and defining everything. I mean, there's videos, there's activities. I direct them to certain websites like the Google AI experiments, for example, or we'll go to the AI Club, and I'll give them time to just explore on their own, to come up with their own questions. And then we come back and share and have a discussion. Sometimes I will give them like a scavenger hunt, in the sense that I'll ask them to find out all they can about certain topics and then share out. So they're kind of like, it's like a genius hour, or they're like the one that knows, or the expert. And I always learn something from them. And so again, I'm going to reiterate, like, you don't have to be, I'm going to skip this one for now, the expert. Now, some of you who are maybe thinking like, wow, there are so many things we have to do, right? We are worried about STEM or artificial intelligence or social emotional learning, and you want to pull in all of these activities. Pittsburgh, very fortunate, has Bird Brain Technologies, and they have now some resources available for artificial intelligence where you're using Google's teachable machine in combination with their Finch robot, and students are learning how to code. They can do some project-based learning with that. They can also, let's pause that a second. They can also learn about artificial intelligence in the process. And this past summer, we had a program here locally where students from different schools came in, and over a course of 4 days, they learned about AI, AR, and VR. They learned about focusing on STEM and STEM skills. And they also learned about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And throughout the week, they connected with a few other people who they didn't know prior to that Monday. And they had a project to pull all of those concepts together. And there was a group that used the Finch robots, and they focused on 2 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And they were learning about artificial intelligence, and they were using teachable machine. And through all of that, they hit all of those things that we as educators are trying to bring in, the social emotional learning, the STEM, we got the AI, and all of that. And it was like, it was a period of 4 days. It was unbelievable what they were able to accomplish. So I like to throw in, some things that are available on the web, like the AI Club, the AI for K-12. And then if you're looking at bringing in some actual, like robots. And I should mention the Bird Brain, you can actually request to borrow and test some of those out. Has anybody here heard of Marty the robot? Anybody? Because in my class, whenever we learn about artificial intelligence, I have a ton of videos, short video clips, and we look at humanoid robots and talk about, how they move, what are the benefits, how can they be used, how do you interact with them? The students saw a video where it was going to be a coworker for somebody. It was a humanoid. And I said, imagine at some time later on, you go into work and you are working with, like a humanoid robot, or you are interacting with artificial intelligence. And like, it's not even that your coworker is a person. So in my class, we learn about AI in a variety of ways, whether it's, the discussion, it's the videos, it's activities where students are actually creating chatbots, like using some of the like MIT App Inventor, for example. But Marty has been a favorite of theirs just because they can see how it has been created. You can also get a free trial of Marty the robot from Robotical. But I can tell you when I got one, my students were just so excited, first of all, to decorate him because it comes with stickers, but there's screen-free coding, and there's also like free where you can just kind of move him around, but you can also create programs. And so it really does give students a lot of different experiences to learn about a variety of topics, the coding, the STEM. They're building social emotional learning skills because they're working together. They're learning about artificial intelligence and humanoids and what that looks like. So let me skip here ahead in the interest of time. So I wanted to dive into ChatGPT. So based on the survey, pretty much everybody has tried ChatGPT at this point. And I love that some people like, basically everybody just is looking at it, just testing out prompts. And so for anybody who doesn't know, that GPT is the generative pre-trained transformer. So it has been fed with massive amounts, the large language model, but massive amounts of data, information, although limited because it was only up until a certain point. So like for this year, if you asked it to like, if students right now, if they have an assignment, they have to pull in information just from something recent, like it's not going to find it because of its limitations, but it can generate. And if you've tried it, you know that you can generate a ton of things. So some of the responses people have asked about, I love this one, how to play a Magnum PI theme party, building plans for professional development, lesson plans, IEPs for changing up some different projects. So there's a lot of different possibilities that you can use it, but it's a chatbot. So it's interacting with you. It's simulating a conversation. It can generate text. Now, there are other ones out there. I saw, Bard was placed into this. Microsoft Bing has its version of it. I read this article about 2 weeks ago. Holly Clark and I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago now, probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We did Saturday morning. It was like 3 lessons that you can do with ChatGPT. And the article talked about, the amount of educators that had used ChatGPT and the frequency of which it had been used. I thought that was interesting that 40% were using it once a week. And it is continuing to grow because I think, at least from my experience and the conversations I've had, is that people are seeing the benefits of it. Now, what I'm sharing with you here is what Holly and I had done. We had met and we had a conversation. We were talking about, history courses and the Constitution. And so we're in Zoom and I came up with a prompt first, and then she came up with the second prompt. So you can see on the screen, how will communication between the founding fathers change the look and wording of the Constitution if it occurred in 2020? So it went through, although it did start by saying it's impossible to say how it would have changed, but there's a few ways it may have affected it. And it brought in things like the use of technology, the diverse perspectives, the scrutiny. So then we changed it and we said, okay, it's great. Now write a lesson plan to help students unpack these ideas. So then it gave the lesson plan. It included the objectives, the materials, the timeline, the conclusion, questions, whatever you wanted it to. And then we gave it a third prompt that was like, what final projects could students do? So is this, taking it away from like the work that we have to do? Well, yes, because we're asking it to create something, but sometimes, there are tons of benefits to that. I think of when I first started teaching, trying to teach 5 different courses and come up with very detailed lesson plans. But sometimes you just need like that structure, but we still have to go through it and, analyze and see, like, is this something that I would actually do in my classroom? If students are using it, I think you could tell most of the time. I know that they're using for Spanish. I can tell when they're in Spanish 1 or 2, and I get this like really well-written, like high level native speaker level language output. But it's just interesting to go through. Oops, didn't mean to click on that one. The different prompts to see what it is. Now, this one I thought was kind of funny. I asked it a question and it was talking about like, I don't know what a teacher is. And, you should use this tech and don't rely on it too heavily and so forth. So it does have some humor in it. And I think the fun thing about it is to explore, from your own experience. And the scary thing also is that when you rely on it, and I had one back here, that's why I minimized. I wanted to show you really quickly a bio. I asked it to write a bio about myself. And I actually happened to be in a call with my professor. I'm working on my doctorate in instructional technology. And I laughed and I said, wow, it looks like our work is done here because apparently I already have a PhD in curriculum and instruction and I'm an associate professor at some university. Totally not true. I have no idea where that came from. So that close reading, the literacy skills, being able to, sort through the information is definitely important. So I don't know if anybody has ever done that. And the other thing too is that, you don't know where it's getting the information from, which is said, like, what kind has been fed into it and by who. So I could write something that's completely made up. And I want to go back to, there we go. I want to go back to this for a second. I could make something up and put it out there on the internet because everything on the internet's right. And it could pull that in and it's not accurate. So some of these things, I'm going to make sure that I go and I drop them into that document. But for my class, some of my students have built a chatbot. And so there are a ton of ideas for how and why you could build a chatbot. For example, I mentioned before, if a teacher has resources, can put them into that. And then students, based on what the teacher has prepared, whether it's documents, it's activities, it might be a website with information, they can then use that targeted chatbot to go through that information rather than some like really massive Google search, for example. Get them to, with the ChatGPT, for example, analyze what it's putting out there and creating. For example, like, what do you think about this? Or let's compare rating. Holly had some really great ideas about how you could have a group of students and, some of the students, well, 4 groups of students, some of the students can only use their textbook. Some of them can only rely on conversation with one another. Some of them are going to use Google and some of them are going to use ChatGPT. And then they're going to engage in conversations and discuss like what the knowledge level is and compare and see, can you tell which one was done by the ChatGPT, for example. So let me minimize this in the interest of time, because like I said, I have a ton of things in here that I could have possibly shared, but I do want to share a few of these because somebody mentioned CuraPod and I'd spoken to them. I bet it was 5 months ago now, but if you have not ever heard of this site, then one, grab that code because that'll give you, I think, 3 months because you're a little bit limited. What you do is an artificial intelligence powered platform that you type in your prompt. What do you want it to create? So if I wanted a lesson on narrating in the past tense, if I wanted a lesson on teaching about a certain math concept, Cuban Revolution is actually a topic that my students are learning about in their 10th grade course right now for history. So I type in whatever I want. A few minutes goes by, I have all of these slides, which you can see. I took a screenshot. You can change the background. They have polls, interactive elements. You can change all of that. Students log in with a PIN number and voila, you have your whole presentation made already available. Another tool, I think it was Lisa that mentioned Conquer AI, affiliated with Moat. That's another good one. There's Slides GPT. But this, again, I used this with my Spanish 3 class, and they said, you have got to be kidding me. That was created like within 3 minutes. Speechify is another one that I mentioned a little bit earlier, and this is the one that had the voices. So students could use this as a way to, they have a text in there and they can listen to the article. You can adjust the settings of it, but it's an artificial intelligence text-to-speech reader. Of course, there is a component that's free, but many of these, there is a cost involved in it, but it uses that natural language processing and it can be fun. So if you want to pick having, Gwyneth Paltrow read a story to your class, or maybe Snoop Dogg or whoever else is available, that could be something that's also fun to do, but it can just be another way to bring it into your classroom, into your school, to let students learn a little bit about AI. Another one, generative AI. So if anybody has not tried this one yet, I had some fun typing in a prompt. So even if you don't teach art, let's say you have students that are working on a project for your class and they have to design something and they say, I'm just not creative. I can't draw anything to represent that. It could be based on a math concept. It could be science. It could be anything. I chose to put cat riding a bike with butterflies with a Salvador Dali theme. And it gave me 4 options. Now you're limited to the number of credits you have left, but that's kind of fun to do, just to see what it creates. And even just to kind of like interact with the type of text and the prompts. And that goes back to the ChatGPT, the prompt engineering. What are the questions that you're asking? And I think that's a really good way also for us to evaluate what we're doing as educators, what opportunities we're giving for our students. What are the assignments, the assessments that we're using? Is it something they can quickly find the answer and just copy and paste from Google? Like, we're not even worried about ChatGPT. Google has been out there. So test out your prompt and see what the answer is that it gives you. Or I did one where I said, come up with 15 ideas for projects based on reading Don Quixote and I gave it some different, for students that want to make video, for students that want to do some drawing without technology and so forth. And I used a few of them, and then I had some of my own. And then one of them is always like, I'll leave it up to you at the very end. But that's just another fun tool to explore. Another one, Scribble diffusion, if anybody has ever heard of this one, kind of similar. So if you have students who say, I'm really not good at drawing, but they could draw a sketch like, oh yeah, this is an owl. And then you type in your prompt and then it creates something else. It's just a way to take it, it recognizes the image and then it uses all of the, the programming, the algorithms that it has to put into something very beautiful, what you were trying to draw. And so if I drew the owl and I'm like, oh yeah, I did this, but it's just a way to explore. So if you say, well, I'm just an art teacher, how can I use this? There are tons of ways to bring in the AI and, the ChatGPT and whatever it is, these emerging technologies that we're using. So I did want to share that one. And I know, Dr. Desiree, that we are almost out of time, but I had several more, but I'll leave it with this one because this is one that I know a lot of educators use. And also, if anybody's interested, I'm doing another webinar later this week on Thursday about ChatGPT and AI. So I'll make sure that's in my document as well, because there's never enough time. But anybody here already using Canva and the magic right and all the functionalities of Canva? Out of curiosity, because it is, if you haven't, if you are somebody that uses Canva, thanks for sharing that, then you're familiar with it. But just earlier this morning, I had a few extra minutes. And I thought, I'm just going to type in, and I put keywords: artificial intelligence, education, benefits, concerns, accessibility, and it automatically put, styles. It had words on the screen, everything. My friend Jamie Donnelly actually created, it's like a word cloud, and it's in the shape of a cat. Imagine that. But she used Canva and she typed in my name, a couple of other words, and it generated in the shape of a cat this word cloud with words that apparently described me, that it found wherever it found it. And she had it printed on like this, I can't even think of what it's called. Oh, Canvas. How could I not think of Canvas when Canva's on the screen? But it was amazing that she actually had done that and created that using Canva. So anybody who has used this, you can use it not just for designing, your templates or presentation, but even just for writing, making an infographic. The one final thing that I'll say here, because I know we're about out of time and I could keep going more and more into the ChatGPT and the prompts, test it out if you haven't, especially if you have extra time. Type in some fun things, type in some questions, ask it to revise some of your information, or if there's something that you've written, like maybe you want to kind of twist it a little bit. Another thing that I thought was awesome about it is I had a rubric and I was so scrambled for time. I didn't have time to put into the chart like I wanted. So I used my voice and I talked out all of the different, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever the breakdown was for each of the categories. And then I put that in. I didn't type it. It was voice. I pasted it into the ChatGPT and I said, make this into a chart. Done. I was like, this is awesome. So I used the voice technology and then used that. But with Canva, being able to create something really quickly or just to get some ideas, sometimes you just need that boost for creativity, for example. But when it comes to the AI, when it comes to the ChatGPT, there are 2 words that I think about that kind of distinguish when it's, I won't say when, but I'll say relational and like logistical / clerical. It's kind of 3 words. So the AI, I don't see that it's going to replace the relational, the like one-on-one, that human connection, those conversations we have, those interpersonal skills, like really getting to know people in relationships. But then that logistical, that clerical, where it can take some of those time-consuming tasks, doing the attendance, putting information from assessments into a spreadsheet or something like that, analyzing it, helping us to see trends and patterns and so forth, and respond to students more quickly or to our colleagues or people that we're working with. That relational versus that clerical, logistical kind of, I see that's where the division is. Great question about checking for plagiarism. So it's tough, right? The one thing that I could say is what you could do, and what I have done is if you type in your prompt, I've had it regenerate a couple of times, or I've pasted it in so it doesn't lose that other one. And some of the wording is the exact same. There are some tools out there like the GPT-0, Turnitin launched their own, I guess it's about a month ago now, and they're able to look at it. But I think it still comes down to, one, knowing your students. And I don't want it to be like, oh, I caught you. Like they always thought that I was like, oh, I'm trying to get you. I'm like, no, I want you to understand when you can use this and when you can't. And so for me right now, I'm taking a course in statistics. I have watched so many YouTube videos. I've read so many pages on Google. I cannot focus on it. And it's really difficult for me. And I don't have access to the teacher all the time. And so if I type into the ChatGPT, for example, please explain this to me, and it does it, and I have that response, and I'm not as stressed about it, like that's beneficial. I'm not trying to get it to do the work for me. I'm just trying to get some extra help with it. But I think it comes down to, knowing the students, knowing what you've taught them, and then also having the conversation and seeing, because the truth is after they leave our classroom, they go on to, career, a job they're going into, they may rely on ChatGPT. That's one thing that's out there as well. The other part is if they go into college, a lot of colleges have those where it sorts through and automatically checks it. And at one point, one of the things I wrote had like a 26% likelihood that it had been copied. And it just came down to, I didn't have the right citations. So I'm learning from that. So checking it, just knowing their writing style, whatever it is that you're teaching, understanding where their strengths are, what you've learned about them as a learner, and then reminding them, like, you need to be able to provide your sources for where you got this information, because like you can't just take anything that's out there and just put it down. You had to get this from somewhere, and keeping that conversation going. So I know I ran a little bit over, Dr. Desiree. I have so much more I could go into, but hopefully people will join in later on this week or reach out to me with questions. I'd love to learn from you. And I thank you all for joining in, doing the survey. And you can connect with me. I think my slide will be, there we go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Like normal, just the getting the information and then getting the tools and having them all connect is like amazing. And thank you so much. And we already have a whole bunch of evaluations that are in, and everybody's like, awesome, this is what I needed, this is what I want to know. Because sometimes you can't really find the information, or you're afraid to ask and all that good stuff. So thank you for coming and giving us this information. It was right on time, exactly what we needed, and we appreciate it all.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who joined in. And one more thing, I just dropped in the chat just in case. It's a more recent article. I do have another article coming out, should be soon, from via Getting Smart, that has some tools and things for students, for teachers, about ChatGPT. I ended up having to cut like half of it out. I had so many, imagine that, I had so many words. So it'll be coming out, but that's one that I had just at the end of March. So thanks, Wayne. Yeah, please connect with me. Would love to connect with all of you, and hope to see you in other events, online or in person.
And will that link that you put in the chat, will that be part of your resources for the people that are not here live?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. That's why I love the Google Docs. I can keep adding to it, and it's just easy to remember. Poth ARVR.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.